Okay, let's get started. Quite a big audience today. Welcome to RPI Office Hours. This is our second monthly webinar series. This one is a little bit deeper dive into querying the ImageNow database. I have a real quick slide deck, and then we'll jump right in. I'm going to really blaze through these. First, just a little bit about us. Almost all of you know this information already. RPI is a professional services firm specializing in the Infor products, as well as Kofax and Highland, of which we are partners with all of. Our headquarters are in Baltimore. However, we do have additional offices in Tampa and right here in Kansas City. And we offer the entire array of professional services offerings. We are, for Highland specifically, very experienced with perceptive content. What we're talking about today, enterprise search, brainware, and on-base across a variety of verticals and solutions. So accounts payable, higher education, healthcare, manufacturing, et cetera, et cetera. So a breadth of experience across our team. Most of you know me. My name is John Marney. I'm the manager on our team of consultants and developers and project managers, working with ImageNow for over 8 years, on top of the other workload solutions that we offer, Kofax, Total Agility, and OnBase, and others. And I am a new father, almost 5 months old. Upcoming activities with RPI. So in September, as part of our Webinar Wednesday series, on September 4th, we have in the morning migrating your enterprise content and data to the cloud. So what this is going to go over is, especially for you perceptive content folks, if you wanted to have your OSMs or your database in like an Azure server or something like that, the ability to set that up and integrate it with your existing environment. And then in the afternoon, we'll have a presentation on what's new in Kofax ReadSoft Online. ReadSoft Online is a SaaS or subscription-based invoice processing solution, which we've deployed quite a few of, and it's really cool. And this summer they did a new release with a lot of new features. Other events that we have coming up. So we are hosting a 2-day workshop. It's free right here in our Kansas City office, October 8th and 9th, for Kofax robotic process automation. It's training and hands-on, includes some food. The only thing you have to pay for is to get here and stay here. We are already over halfway full from registrations. If you're interested at all, please go get signed up. If we're evaluating doing a second session if we go over capacity. Then please come see us at Community Live in September. We are having a happy hour on Monday evening at Bar 32, which is the bar at the top of the hotel where the event is taking place. So please go register for that at rpic.com/communitylive2019 and come say hello to us. I'll be there. Finally, for our Infor clients, RPI will be at Inforum September 23rd through 26th. If you'd like to schedule some time to meet with us, please go to our website, rpic.com/inforum. There's a handy dandy scheduler right there. Okay. So that's most of my slide deck. Let's get into this. So what are office hours and what are we doing today? So office hours are really whatever you want them to be. It is meant to be as informal or formal as you need. It is a demonstration. It's part training. It could be help desk if you're encountering some difficulty that you are encountering that you'd like some help with. It's a working session. It's going to be fairly technical, especially today. If you don't have any SQL knowledge, you may get a little lost. There will be frequent rabbit trails into other topics, and that's perfectly okay. I want to cover the things that are most beneficial to the audience. Hopefully a little bit of silliness. I don't take myself too seriously. I don't want you to take me too seriously. And it really can be whatever you want it to be. Final slide. I'm not responsible for your actions. And I say this because I'm going to give you knowledge to empower you to go conquer your ImageNow database. But if you take that and go crazy with it and delete a bunch of stuff that you shouldn't, then I'm not taking responsibility for that. So practice safety first. Select statements in your production are probably okay as long as they aren't returning too huge of data sets. Don't run inserts, don't run deletes. However, if you ever get into a situation where you think you need to, I'm happy to support you in doing so. And it's always better to go use your test environment as a playground instead of doing things in production. So learn from my example. Okay, so I'm going to hop over to my virtual machine where I have some stuff prepared. One moment. Okay, and changing my shared screen. Should show my virtual machine. Let's just stop and start again. There we go. Okay. So please, I'm gonna do a quick demonstration of a couple basic queries. But at any point, please just pop in, throw questions into the GoToWebinar. I'm happy to field questions as they come up, and I will take a break here in about 15 minutes to take questions as well. So the ImageNow database is generally INOW or INOW 6 if you're coming from an older version. I have this here in my SQL Server Management Studio. The basic table that almost every query is going to start with or revolve around is your INDoc. INDoc keeps a record of every single document that exists inside of the system. And so if I did a right-click, select top 1,000 just to get a sample. You see it lists out all of the columns that are available. But at its most basic, you'll see that there's a drawer ID, and then folder tab, field 3, field 4, field 5. So those who are familiar with older versions of ImageNow, field 1 and field 2 used to be called folder and tab. So these are your index keys. There's your unique document ID. Here's the document type, right? So this should look pretty familiar. So let's say at its most basic, I'm going to trim this down and get rid of my columns. Actually, let's do this. I want the index keys. So I'm going to delete these. Okay. So this query returns the index keys, but let's say I want that drawer name, right? Because this is the unique ID for what that drawer is inside of ImageNow, and I want to pull back the actual drawer name instead of the unique ID. So the first table I'm going to sync up with here is INDrawer. INDrawer contains a list of all the drawers that are set up inside the system. So if I do a quick select on this, you'll see a drawer ID, drawer name, description, just like it would appear inside your management console. So back to my query, I'm going to join drawer. I need to give that a name. And I'm going to relate them using that drawer ID. So DC drawer ID equals DR drawer ID. Oops. So I'm logged in as an admin, so I need to provide the end-user schema on each table. Okay. Doesn't like that. So I'm going to add the database name as well. Okay. So, and then I'm going to change the drawer ID column to drawer name. So DR drawer name. Okay. So I rerun this query. Oh, that's not what I want. I rerun this query, and you'll see that now it is populating the drawer name instead of the unique ID. And so I can do the same thing with document type ID if I want against the INDoc type table to get the actual name of the document type. All right. So let's take this then one step further. And again, if you have any questions around what we're doing here, please throw them out there. Any data that you want to see presented, any data you want to see how to get to, happy to demonstrate. So we're going to take this one step further. Probably the next most useful is a custom property. And custom properties in the ImageNow database are stored in a really wacky way. We're going to walk through it. But the first thing I'm going to do is pare down this data set to make it a little more usable. So I want to do where drawer name equals AP. And I'm going to do where one of my index keys equals, actually I'm going to do a like. The wild card. All right, so this should return something like 20 some documents. Okay. So these are some documents inside of my AP drawer. I'm going to now join this up with the custom property table in order to pull back some additional information. So what I will do is the first thing I have to do is join this to the IN instance table. So if you start with INDoc, the next layer down is IN instance. And IN instance contains a record of almost every single item that exists in the system. So whether it's a configuration item or a document or a project or whatever, it's going to have an instance ID. So, and if you select there is an instance ID inside of the doc table. So, so if I do this, select it out of the doc table, this is the instance ID for the document. So then if I join that up to the instance table, IN instance, and I relate them using the instance ID, and now I can retrieve information out of the IN instance table. And there is one really important field that exists in the instance table, IN instance, instead of INDoc, and it's created date. So if I actually select, there is a created date column in the document table. So if I select the document table's creation time, it's actually going to return a value like this, 1970, January 1st, 1970. Which, in database speak is a blank date, basically. So actually, the date for a document, when it was created, is actually stored in the instance table. So if I change that to be the instance creation time, you'll see that that is now populated with an actual value.
John?
Yeah.
Is there a way to pull a list of users who have private filters on a view in ImageNow workflow?
Wow, that's a great question. I actually don't know, and we can find out together. My guess is that there should be a way to do it because you can see the private filters from inside of the view setup, and you can see the users that have them. So there should be a way to do it, and we can definitely figure that out. I'm going to wrap up this custom property demonstration, and we'll dive into that. So great question. And this will just take a couple of minutes here. So let's do, so then the next thing we need to do is identify what custom property we actually want to pull back. The list of custom properties and their unique IDs are in the IN prop table. So if I do a quick select on IN prop, you'll see property ID, the property name, type, active, things like that. I actually want to get, the vendor name custom property. So scroll through here. Take this unique ID. And I'm going to come back here. Now, there's still one more table we need to relate, and that is the dirtiest table in this database. It is called IN instance prop. An IN instance prop is a list of every single document, custom property that it exists, and a column to indicate whether it's a string, a number, or a time value, and the value contained within it. So what we're looking at here is the instance ID of the document or project, if you're using or folders, if you're using folders, the property ID, the unique ID of the actual custom property being used, and then columns depending on what type of property it is. And you see that these columns exist regardless of whether it's a string, a number, or a time custom property. This is what is referred to in database speak as being non-normalized. And what happens is every single time a document gets created, if that document type has 20 custom properties assigned to it, 20 new rows get inserted into this database. That's why it's really important from an ImageNow design perspective that we reduce the number of custom properties to the very bare minimum needed. I have clients with very high document volume that this table has grown to hundreds of thousands of rows, which SQL Server can handle very large data sets, but there does come a point where scaling up that large just for one table can be really problematic to your queries. And it causes things like workflow queue views and just normal document views to not really execute very well anymore. But that notwithstanding, I have to join the INStance table to this one in order to fetch my custom property value. So back to my query. I'm going to do a left outer join because I can't guarantee that the document type that in this document list actually has a custom property. So left outer join INStance prop. Okay, on. I'm going to join it to the instance table. Actually, I need to join it to the INProp table. No, I'm sorry, instance. Sorry. Instance ID equals instance ID. Okay. And then finally, I need to add a condition in here because if I do this, it's going to pull back all of the custom properties for each document. So that's actually going to make my data set pretty big, 498 rows. So I want to reduce this just to one custom property. So I'm going to use the property ID. No, sorry. Prop ID that I fetched out of that INProp table. Okay, so now I have correct number of rows. I need to add in the actual column that I want to pull back. So I'm going to do that the INStance prop table dot string value, because I know it's a string custom property because it's my vendor name. I'm going to name it so it's clear and re-execute. And you'll see that it populates the vendor name for these records. Now, the challenge here is that every new custom property that you want to add to a query, you have to do another join back to the INStance prop table with a different unique ID. This can make the queries really messy and slow because having to query the table and one of the largest tables in the database over and over and over is very expensive from a query standpoint. All right. So let's start with that question that we got in. And if you have any questions about what I just demonstrated, please throw them in. We'll get to as many as we can through this session. So the first question was, is there a way to pull a list of users who have private filters on a view in ImageNow workflow? Okay, so there's a few components here. There's going to be tables for the workflow. There's going to be tables for the views. So actually, when I first heard that question, I thought it was for just the views. If it's in a workflow queue, we're going to have to see if this is even in the database anywhere. So let's start with the view tables and see if there's anything in there. So your normal view tables for your document views start with InView. And you'll see if I do a quick select on there that there's a bunch of views set up, view name, unique ID for the view. And this actually contains the filter names inside of them. So, by the way, I'm doing most of the investigation here. I've never actually tried to seek this data out before, so we're learning together. So you'll see that there are view types. So it looks like 0 is a view and 1 is a filter. So first of all, I think I would start by just narrowing this down to filters. And view category is looking interesting. So let's see if I can figure that out. 7, 6. So probably something I want to do is actually make sure that in my system I have a private filter set up on a queue, a workflow queue. So let's try that real quick. So one of the questions we're getting while this loads up, seen the yellow sticky note in the application where users put notes. How do I get that to the information in the database? The actual sticky note information may not be in the database. We'll find out. Is there a way to query the list of users so it can be compared to the list of AD active users so I can remove the turned users? Yes, querying AD is actually the more challenging part. I guess if you already have a list, then yes, we can absolutely do a list of users out of the database. And how can we get to the path of the OSM file for a given document? Unfortunately, that is encrypted inside of the database, and we can't get to it. However, there are some tricks to get it through the API. So we'll talk through that a little bit more. But to answer your question directly, the image path in the OSM is not in the database at all, or not accessible in the database. So quickly, I'm just going to set up a private filter on a workflow queue. So I have, actually, here's one already. It's called recently routed, and it's under my accounts payable workflow. And it's not under a queue, it's actually just under workflow, but it should effectively be the same thing. So I'm going to pop back to my my list here, and I see that actually on this list there's one called recently routed as a view category of 6. So without being 100% sure yet, I'm guessing that 6 indicates it's on a workflow process. Possible that 7 is on a queue. So I'm going to go back to here and add one to a queue real quick. Sure. So that's John 1, saving that private filter under the AP approval error queue. Okay. Back to here. I'm going to rerun this query so I can see that new the new filter. So, okay, so it looks like recently routed, which was the one on the workflow process, was view category of 6. And the one I created on the queue was also 6. So that doesn't indicate whether it's on a workflow or a queue. There's other information. So there's a parent view ID, which I'm guessing that has to relate back to either the workflow queue view or the process view. So ultimately, if you needed to join those back to the parent view, we could do that to identify where exactly it exists. But then you also have this private user ID, and I'm going to take a stab that this is the user who set it up. And we're going to verify that. So user IDs are stored in a separate table. First, I'm going to filter this down to and view category equals 6. So these are all of our private filters on workflows. Now I'm going to join this up to the user table. So enter join. I am user. I think that's what it is. Now user. Might be the double check what the table's called. Be helpful if I knew my alphabet. There we go. Oh, I'm SC user. That's right. INSC user. So the actual user list is, SC is shorthand in this database for security. The actual user list is contained within the INSC user table. I'll give that a name, ISU, and we're going to join them by that. So ISU dot, I think it's user ID equals, whatever this table is. I need to give this table a name. INV dot private user ID, and we're going to add a column for the ISU dot username. So I want username. Okay, give this a whirl. And there you go. So I was able to identify the username of the individual who set up or owns this individual private filter. So I think that answers that question. Let me just reread it real quick. Pull a list of users who have private filters on a view. So yes, effectively you could pare down the results in this query to get to that. So if you have any follow-up on that, please throw it in there. I'm going to move on to the next slide. All right, the sticky note question. So annotations are interesting because the information about the annotation and a lot of the metadata for the annotation, who applied it, where it exists on the document, does exist in the ImageNow database. The actual annotation image exists inside the OSMs. Sticky notes are kind of unique in, like, let's say a text annotation, because there's content within the annotation that changes based on user input. So this should be pretty easy to find out. I don't know whether the sticky note information exists in the database or not. We should be able to get to the annotation tables and find out very quickly. So I think it's just this subob annotations. Just checking real quick. So the IN, I think it's IN subob annotation. Let's start there. So to follow through the table logic here, you have on a document, you have IN doc. Then below that is IN instance. Below that is IN version. Then you go into logical object, which are your, let's say your pages per document. Below that are physical objects, which are the actual files that exist in the OSM, which we're going to get to as part of our next question. Related to the logical object is the sub-object, and sub-objects can be anything from a form to an annotation to, I guess, primarily just those. Other information that's associated with the document, but isn't actually part of the document itself. So let's go to this IN subob annote. Again, we're diving into a few things that I haven't necessarily explored too deeply before. So you'll see that the information in here has a lot of positioning information, has some color information. So these are probably going to be mostly things like stamps. 137 rows. I'm not seeing a lot in the way of, well, let's see, values. So again, I should probably go apply a sticky note to a document just to make sure I have data in the database to work with. So I'm going to open this file, maybe. Going to apply a sticky note. Let's say John's test sticky note. And just in case I need it, I'm going to grab this document ID. Okay. Store that away somewhere. Alrighty. So this one had 137 rows before. So it's not in this table. I just applied a new annotation and it didn't. Here, annotation text. This is looking promising. Aha. So this looks like it has annotation text. These are going to be stamps. I'm guessing the latest entry in here is John's test sticky note. I'm hoping. Yeah, there's some interesting stuff in here. Yeah, I'm not seeing it. So about the only thing I could do here to dive into this further or get a better answer is I really need to start with the doc ID and relate it back to the subobject table and then filter down to the individual annotation that was applied. Because I'm not seeing what I just applied, and I think it would be here. Coordinates. Yeah. So let's let me knock out a couple of the easier questions, and we'll revisit that shortly. Query list of users. Yes. So users are very easy. It's actually that table I joined to earlier. The question was, is there a way to query the list of users so it can be compared to a list of Active Directory active users so I can remove the termed users? So, I mean, I would say, first of all, you should probably explore setting up the user replication agent, which can handle this automatically, deactivate users that are deactivated in your Active Directory. But barring that, it's really just this INSC user table. So this contains every username, all of the information that exists in the user setup in the management console, and it includes the is active column, which should just be 1 if active and 0 if they're not active in Perceptive. And that's really as simple as it is. So this username is the username they're set up with in Perceptive, which generally should match their Active Directory username. All right, let me know if there's any follow-ups to that one. Path to the OSM file for a given document from the database. I'm going to answer this one real quick. So, so like I said, no, you cannot get to the path of an OSM object. And let me show you what it does have. So the INPhysob table is a list of every physical file that exists in the OSM1 or whatever OSMs you have set up. So if I do a quick select on that, you'll see that there's a Physob ID, OSM tree ID, which you can relate back to the OSM tree tables to see where it exists. And you'll see there's this OSM path column. And it's not populated for some of these. I can't say exactly why. Maybe the file's deleted. It's tough to say, but you'll see it is populated for at least one of these. And so this is an encrypted file path. And Highland has a tool that they don't share that can decrypt this. I don't know whether they charge for it or whatever. There's actually not too difficult way to get to this information. However, if you have an iScript license, which a vast majority of ImageNow users do, we can write an iScript that uses the API call to try and export a document, but you give it an invalid file path to export to, it will actually log out in the iScript log the OSM file path it's trying to retrieve it from, and then it never actually exports it because you give it an invalid file path. You do that and loop through whatever documents in a view or what have you that you're trying to get an OSM path for, and you can effectively get the information that exists behind this encrypted string. So that's just a little bit of a trick that we have learned through the years. Next question, are there any data texts available for ImageNow like there are in Lawson? A document that states the table uses field information and relationships to other tables. So that's a really great question. Highland does have an ERD. So for those who aren't familiar, it's an entity relation diagram. Basically, that defines the tables, the columns inside of them, and the way they relate to each other. Generally also includes the primary keys and foreign keys in each table. So they do have that. There used to be some amorphous process that you could go through to get a hold of that. I don't know whether they distribute it anymore or not. I I know it well enough generally that at this point I don't really need it, so I haven't sought it out in many years. That's the only documentation I am aware of, and the only documentation I'm aware of that has ever been distributed to any clients or partners. What they don't have that you're really asking about is a data definition to say what, if I look at the INDoc table, what information does each column represent? To my knowledge, that doesn't exist, and that's locked up in the heads of folks like me, and why we're doing webinars like this one. So unfortunately, the answer is no, I'm pretty sure. And if you have any specific questions, I'm really happy to help. Okay, follow up on the private filter question. Basically, thank you, you're welcome. Will the same query work for private filters under documents? Yes, it will. So if I go back to that real quick, if I need to close up some of my junk here. Let's do a couple minutes on cleanup. So that's user tables. I'm going to leave that one open. So on this query, the only thing that was narrowing this down to workflow filters was this view category equals 6. If I don't do that, it will execute across all private filters. You'll see there's view category 1, which is a normal document filter, but in this case, a private filter, not a public. And then I don't know what 7 is. It doesn't have a view name. Let's see if we can see who created it. INOW. I'm guessing that this might be one that has been deleted. Tough to say. But yes, this is all private filters right here. All right, next. You can get a comment. You can get a sticky note via data via iScript if that helps. Excellent point. So we're going to revisit that to see if we can drill down and actually identify where exactly it exists. But generally, it probably is easier to get to that data via iScript, just because the API calls that retrieve the document data anyway, make all of the document metadata through the document object available very easily, instead of having to go join a bunch of tables. Next question. Is there a data dictionary for ImageNow tables? Yeah, similar question, already answered, not to my knowledge. If it exists, I've never seen it, and it's under tight security at Highland headquarters. What is the correct way to delete users through SQL? We have over 2,000 users we'd like to delete. Excellent question. The safest way to do it is going to be the safest way is going to be through the API. So I probably wouldn't try to do that through SQL. Truthfully, and again, here we're verging on territory where I'm going to caution you that deleting anything out of the ImageNow database is pretty risky. I've done it before. You can definitely get away with it. So really, if you delete users out of that INSC user table, that is the master record of users inside of Perceptive. The problem you're going to run into is that there are so many related tables that also have user information that point back to that. I mean, look at views, look at documents, et cetera, et cetera. I think that it's going to prevent you from deleting users very easily. You know what? Let's give it a shot. So I deleted, or I pulled up the INSC user table. If this doesn't work really easily, we're probably going to move on, because I think that it's going to end up stopping me due to relationship constraints. Who knows which of these I can actually do without? Let's say this one. So I'm going to take that user ID, delete from user. I need to do my fully qualified. Where see what happens. Sorry. Now let me delete them. So just to verify that that doesn't do anything incredibly system breaking, let's go log into the management console and see if the record is gone. Now it should be gone here. I think probably what would happen is that if you ever tried to pull up a document, let's say you pulled up a document that that user created. Instead of the username displaying on the created by, it would probably display the unique ID. So as long as that's okay. So users, if your processor can. So that didn't delete it. Requerying here. Is that not the one I deleted? Oh, I did China. That's right. So, so it did delete them out of the system. And just to see, if I ever go look for a document that was created by that user, document property, where is it? User created by is equal to AP processor China. They probably never created any documents, but so it will let you delete them directly out of that table, but that's probably not something I would advise due to the table relationships. Again, you could write an iScript to delete a bunch of users that would respect all of those things a lot easier, a lot more easily. Someone commented that they asked for either the ERD or the data def, I'm not sure, 5 years ago, and they were not willing to share. Yeah, so I actually started my career at Perceptive Software Support back in 2010, and that was it was a common request, and usually the answer was no. However, I know that there are organizations that got it through some sort of begging or something. So it is possible. I don't know if it's still possible. Any suggestions on how to determine the amount of time an item spent in a queue? Yeah, totally. That's absolutely available in the database. So diving into, so we have about 15 minutes here. I'm going to take a quick glance through the rest of the questions to make sure that I can hit on probably the most, the broadest, or the ones most easily demonstrated. Diving into the workflow tables is a big conversation. It could probably be its own full hour. So let me look at these questions real quick. Do you know of any cons of converting your database to Unicode? I don't know of any cons. We have done a number of Unicode conversions. There are risks, but mostly just from a project planning perspective, it can take a long time to do. I don't know if there are any risks or cons from a data storage perspective, but for the most part, every table except your string table or every column and table except your string columns are the exact same as the non-Unicode database. So it's really not that you're converting a whole database, you're just converting the string data types. So really fairly simple. Another reason you don't delete is for document history. Yes, definitely. Yeah, so it's just really risky to go delete users out of the database directly. Completely agree. I've noticed that our database shows time in the GMT time zone. Yes, it does. So you always have to allow for that when querying. Is there any way to apply localization to the time fields on the database? Well, yeah, this comes up every time we get into querying. You don't want to, is unfortunately the answer. So you could probably go manipulate the data to store it in whatever local time zone, but the ImageNow server is expecting the date in GMT and it wants to display date times to users in its local time. So it's going to perform that conversion no matter what, and there is no way around that to my knowledge. I'm 99% sure there isn't. The system was designed to store in GMT specifically as an enterprise application so that if you have users across multiple time zones, it respects where the locality of where they're logging in from. So, you know, it's, I think, actually probably a proper design, and it just unfortunately does have to be manually accounted for during direct database querying. A comment that says if you have business insights, they're more likely to grant your request for the ERD. They said they have it, but when we upgraded and made a new one, we had to pay complete and escalate request again. Yeah, I imagine. And in fact, in 7.2, I think, 7.2 is probably the last major schema change for the database, and some things did change. So, you know, the upgrade or the database changes in 7.2 actually do take a while to apply to the database, whereas, say, 7.3, the most recently released, are real quick. No, in fact, I don't even think there is a schema change for 7.3. So yes, things do change. For example, that created time that I demonstrated at the beginning has moved into the IN instance table, and that was not always the case. So yes, and one comment is that, so since Business Insight was brought up, obviously if you have a reporting tool, the goal is to use that instead of going into do querying directly. I'm much more comfortable just getting into the database, and I find Business Insight as a tool to be clunky, and maybe that's understating it for those of you who are familiar with it. So I generally, even when I go write BI reports, I still write the SQL directly and just instead of using the reporting objects inside BI. I've done time zone report thing, not worth the effort. Noted. Yeah. Even the client is buggy. If you search today, it gives you GMT today, no local. So so that's interesting. I don't think that's supposed to be true. So if I go look at back to my first query I started with, and look at the created time for document. So this is close enough. So I've got I should have a creation time. No, this isn't what I want. This one. I've got too many windows open here, everyone. Coming off the rails. All right, so if I just add the creation time. See, no. So it should be that these values are GMT, and I can't remember whether it displays the local client or the servers. I think it's the server's time zone is what ends up displaying when a user. Either way, we don't have to dive into that exact thing, but there is a difference between what's in the database and what the user sees, or there should be. I was able to get one after filling out a few legal forms, getting signatures. Okay, so there is a process to get the ERD. How do you update the doc type depending on certain values in F5? Generally, for a volume of document manipulation and manipulating the metadata, we would want to use iScript. It's a lot safer. If you wanted to update a doc type for a document via the SQL, you definitely can. It's really fairly low risk. Well, I take that back. So if you went in and updated the document ID in this table, in the INDoc table, for a document, the system would respect that and use the new document ID. However, as we saw, when you create a document, it adds all of those custom properties, whether they're filled out or they're null or anywhere in between, to the IN instance prop table. If you change the document type manually, it's not going to necessarily insert all of those custom properties. So my guess is that it would probably freak out on you when you went to open that document. So I would definitely use an iScript to do it. But iScript, it's very easy to lay out the logic for if this and do that for reindexing. If I create a document at 5 p.m. PST, it won't show in a relative search for today. So that's interesting. And now that you say that, I do recall there being issues with how time frames are submitted to the server to retrieve documents versus what is displayed. I think you're right there. So there are some inconsistencies with what's displayed to the user versus what's submitted to the server versus what is stored on the database. So what is the folder ID or name stored as in the database? Can you run a query for documents under a particular folder? Yes. That's not too hard. I do want to circle back to the sticky note question and the workflow history question because we're running out of time. The last question is webinar session like this for iScript, please. It's on the list. Did we end up deciding we're going to do it this year?
Well, let me look at the schedule.
So we really want to do it. We know there's a huge hunger for it, and there's a ton of useful, infinite useful use cases for iScript. It is just so hard to actually condense useful knowledge down into an hour. And we could do multiple sessions, what have you. The most effective thing you can do if you want to leverage iScript is get a person who has some basic JavaScript knowledge, make sure they have basic ImageNow knowledge, and let's do a training. It's not that hard once you get some great examples and once you get someone who really knows what they're doing to show you through it. Our lead consultant, Michael Madsen, just went on site and gave to one of our clients and gave an iScript training to their entire team. So we can do multiple people. I mean, we've considered doing an on-site workshop here in our office for iScript training. So we're probably going to do a webinar like this for it, but I'm just not sure how much people are really going to be able to take away from it. Okay, let's do our last two things here. So we're probably going to run over a little bit, but I do want to get these answered. So let me start with the workflow history question. We were asked, the question was actually calculating the amount of time something's spent in workflow. So there are a number of workflow tables there. They all start with INWF. So the first one is INWF item. So this is a list of every item inside of workflow. So if you do a select on this table, you'll see that you have an item ID. So this is a workflow item, unique ID. The object ID, which is actually, the object ID is either the document ID, I believe the document ID or the folder ID of what is the item that's actually in workflow. Then you have other metadata, right? So like the creation, user ID, creation time. More appropriately, you have some other times like queue start time. So if you're trying to build a record of the entire time a document is in a queue, you have the queue start time and you should have the queue end time. Maybe not. So what gets difficult is you have state start time. So every time it's opened, right, it gets set to a different state. So you can perform calculations based on when it is open, close, open, close. Then it actually has, I believe, a separate state for when it's routed out. So what you would end up doing is calculating time between queue start time and whichever state number is routed out. So if I want to pull down the history for just one object, let's start with that. I don't know any in here that would have multiple entries, but let's just go ahead and take this one, for example. Yeah, so this one only has one entry, which means it was routed into a queue and never touched again. So it's a little difficult to do this example on the fly, but I believe that the state detail for routed out is going to be that 25, just from looking at the data. So if you calculate the date diff between creation or queue start time, or you can do state start time for when it was routed in, versus the state start time for the routed out action, you could get the time in that queue. You add all those together for the entire history of the document, you have the entire time it was in workflow. Or just the oldest start time versus newest start time. We have written many reports that do workflow efficiency, calculating those kinds of things. The important thing to remember is that all of your information is not right here in this table. So INWF item is for items currently in workflow. You also have, and where they currently are. That's why I didn't find, I believe that's why I didn't find multiple results. You also have the item history, WF item hist, which contains the history for every document. Additionally, you also have these two archive tables. So if a document has hit a complete queue and are archived out of workflow, then the data is moved out of these tables and into the archive table. So if you have an archived item that has completed its workflow process, you actually have to join up potentially up to 4 different tables to get to the complete workflow history. And that's it can be kind of challenging, and there's a lot of gotchas inside of that, such as what if a document restarted the entire workflow process? Are you trying to report on the total turn time from beginning to end, or are you trying to get to the total turn time for the life cycle of that workflow document? Because it just depends on whether you're trying to find out how you're aging items in workflow, or whether you're trying to find out how efficient the users are processing things through workflow. So that one, to dive into deeper, you probably need to reach out to us, but hopefully that gets you started. The final one, not so much iScript training, specific useful perceptive content related functions within iScript. Okay, so that we can potentially do that as part of an iScript webinar. The final thing we're going to do is circling all the way back to that sticky note content. So let's see. It's going to be a little challenging. I'm going to pull back my my query for my documents. Close some stuff up here. I think this is it. All right. So first of all, let's get the document that I just added. I had stored that. Stored that document ID somewhere. Let's just go get it again. And so I know people will probably have to leave as we're approaching our end time. I'm going to try and finish out this question. If you have any ideas of other things that you'd like to see presented, please let us know. What's our next one on?
The next one will be on ImageNow tasks.
Okay, so we're doing how to use ImageNow tasks next month. The month after that, I believe we're doing the learn modes and learn mode scripting. And we have, I think we have those all available to sign up for on our website, or if not, they will be soon. So please go ahead and throw those out there. And again, if you have ideas for things that you'd like to see presentations on, let us know. All right, so I have this ID. All right, so I'm just going to get rid of these conditions and say where document ID equals this. All right, so this is the file that I added the sticky note to. I'm going to join this up to, we have to go all the way down the chain to get to the logical object table to join it up to the sub-object table, I think. Just to verify that that's true, I'm going to query back that sub-object table again. Sub ID. Okay, so I have to join all the way down to the physical object. Okay, so we'll do join user dot, so we do version next. see the version ID. Equals and join dot on logout on this version. Count. Yeah, how these things are related real quick. Only done this a million times. Version. Okay, log out to version. That's what we gotta do. So, dot version ID equals LG version ID. All right, so we're close. Then the final thing is the user dot on field dot field ID equals LG dot CLE. Okay, theoretically this should work. Cool. And just to demonstrate, we want to add in a column from Physob. So we'll do PO dot ID. All right, so this is the physical object ID for this page. And actually, if I had multiple pages, I think we could edit this query to allow for multiple results. But I'm going to back up these custom properties since we don't really need them. Oops. Okay. Okay. So then I need to join up to the sub object. So here's where we were trying to identify these sticky notes. That version like that. Sub. So I'm actually do. I'm just going to query the dot ID and log it. Log ID and so I'm going to get the sub object name. So this should give me a list of the sub objects that exist on this document. Okay, how about I don't think this should change. So let's back this out. Maybe that's the wrong table. Maybe I need the annotation table. we're going to get the oh, yeah. Okay, so it doesn't exist in the sub-ob table. Let's try the other one. Interesting. This one. That is the document I actually applied an annotation. Yeah. Well, I don't want to let it stump me. Where could it be? So we've identified that there are no sub-objects listed for this physical object. And just to double check that I didn't mess something up in the query, I'll take this physical object ID and just query the sub-ob table. Yeah, so no sub-objects. So the annotation isn't listed here. So there must be another relationship. The other thing is that, again, the other way to make sure or to check this is if the text isn't stored in the database, it's going to be in an OSM file. So let's just check that real quick. That'll tell us. We're going to go to so sub-object data is in OSM2. I go to the very last thing created. Which is an E form. So it's not in here, which would make me think it is in the database somewhere. It's just we're going to resort to just poking around. There. Well, may have to throw in the towel on this one for now. The thing that's stumping me here, and I feel like I've done this before, but I can't be certain. I'm not able to relate the existence of that annotation to the document. I see other types of annotations where I would expect to find them, but I'm not finding the sticky notes. So I'm wondering if sticky notes are stored in a separate table specifically because they're a little bit different. And just to prove that, I guess if I add a stamp to this, or let's say a stamp just because I've seen those. Just like that. Then the query I'm using should now return something. Not that one. Yeah, so a column was added to the subob annotation text table. So then that would mean an additional. See this. Might be that annotations are actually stored as a physical object, or at least sticky notes. So I'm probably going to go ahead and pause on that one for now. I'll do a little more research and see if I can get back to you on it. Last couple questions. Dot keyword, freeform, keyword table maybe. Let's just see. Oh, my line. Keyword. I know that this table's here. Anyone have any? Oh, doc keyword. Yeah, okay. So I think these are notes. And I'm not seeing anything like the, box. No, all right. So keyword table looks like it's your doc notes. We'll do some more research. I'm going to go ahead and call it quits for today. Thank you everyone for attending. It's been just so much fun. I hope you've gained a lot from this session and you'll join us again for our next. Thank you, everyone.